6 months later, Tom returned to England. But then almost immediately set off on another expedition. This time he was not looking for headhunters, he was looking for cannibals. In the summer of 1933, he joined an Oxford expedition to the New Hebrides, which in the 1930s were thought to be home of one of the world's most primitive peoples. Ornithology might be his official responsibility, but after his Borneo experiences, his goal was now cultural immersion. And he was heading towards an anthropological gold mine.
If you're out in islands in Vanuatu, then the New Hebrides, like Santo or Malakula, you come across the most amazing people. And you've got well over 100 different languages in a country that at the moment has a population of 200,000 people. Twice as many languages and cultures as the whole of Europe, all squeezed into one teeny little place. And so, of course, they've developed cultures that are just out of the ordinary. But they are, unfortunately, cultures that white people always think are primitive or savage, but they're not. And this is one of the things I think that really intrigued Harrisson, that puzzled him more and more.
When the Oxford University expedition had finished on Santo in 1934, the team were all due to board a boat and go home. But Tom Harrisson, or perhaps their team leader, had other ideas.
There had been a bit of a set-to between Dr. John Baker, the leader of the expedition, and Tom Harrisson. It was to do with Baker's new young wife, Zita.
Harrisson had met Zita in Oxford, and by the time the expedition left, an affair was in full swing.
Baker actually didn't really want Harrisson in the boat. Or maybe Harrisson felt that maybe he shouldn't really be in the boat because things would get a little bit hotter in the boat than they were on shore. And so when the boat left, Harrisson was actually left standing on the wharf there in Santo with £5 in his pocket.
Broke and needing to earn his fare home, he took up the post of colonial officer and was appointed acting district agent for the island of Malakula, home to the then famously aggressive cannibal tribe, the Big Nambas. This so-called primitive culture of cannibals was an irresistible magnet for him.
Malakula is the island of the warriors, the megalithic cultures, and all that sort of stuff. And for him, this was like, this was fantastic. And cannibalism.
Having myself dropped anchor on similar shores, I can well understand his excitement. Once ashore, he decided to break the colonial taboos of the day and go native.
And that was a considerable transition from Harrow or Cambridge or ornithology even, living among people who were then still eating each other. And I spent a very, very happy year largely living among them, doing what they did in some detail, and not, during that time, having anything to do with white people or anything else at all.
In his report that he wrote for the British government in the capital, it's one of the best ever district agent reports that ever came out of the islands. Harrison's report goes right to the nub of the thing, medical care, survival of cultures. He admired very much these peoples who were strongly independent, who didn't want to be missionized, who didn't want government control, and this is what you got on the island of Santo and the island of Malakula. And the kind of stuff that he was writing about is the kind of stuff that needed to be said for decades. It needed to be said for decades. And in this sort of sense, Harrisson was way ahead of his time.
He believed that anthropology should be a two-way process. The observer who collected information should justify his research by promoting the interests of those he was studying. He quickly wrote up his experiences and in 1937 published a book, Savage Civilization, which was received with considerable critical acclaim.
He wanted it to be read as widely as possible, and that's why it came out also published by the Left Book Club in England in a red cloth paperback edition, which was fantastic, and it became a bit of a cult book. People looking at that book at first might think, he's writing about the culture of the people in the New Hebrides, but what he's actually writing about is the cultures of the traditional peoples in the New Hebrides being attacked by this savage civilization from outside, which is the white civilization.
The book championed the cannibals' right to their way of life and to their land, which was being sold from under them to Western enterprises.
Some anthropologists would say he wasn't an anthropologist. I would say he was one of the best.
I began to feel that I should try much more of this. And then it occurred to me that it was very odd that no one had done the same sort of thing in Britain.
And so he started on a new project, and one that was to make him a household name in Britain by the outbreak of war. He saw in the terraced slums of pre-war Britain the longhouses of Borneo, and he treated the visitors to the working men's clubs and pubs as he had treated the cannibals in the New Hebrides. He took the concept of cultural immersion and applied it to the people of Britain.
When I came back to Britain, I felt this very strongly, and as I say, having this sort of South American background, I didn't feel implicated, and I didn't take for granted many of the things that people who've been brought up all their lives in Britain do take for granted. On the other hand, I was very fond of them and didn't dislike them, so I wasn't anti them. And I thought, well, how shall I begin?
As in the New Hebrides, he decided on cultural immersion. He moved to lodgings in a terrace street in Bolton and began work in a cotton mill 11 hours a day. He then got together with poet Charles Madge and others in 1937 to begin a pioneering project in social anthropology. It was to develop the techniques that are used in all market research today. He called it mass observation. 1930s Britain was deeply divided socially, and Harrisson wanted to connect them and us. He called mass observation an anthropology of ourselves.
One was greatly struck working in these contexts in a place like Bolton with a complete discrepancy between what all the sort of people I was working with thought and talked about and what was being reported in the newspapers and even, if I may say so, in the BBC of those days. And there were, in fact, in those years, two different languages almost being spoken in England, two different languages of thought.
Harrisson brought his own brand of fieldwork to mass observation. He believed the ideal instrument were these, a pair of earplugs. He felt that you must first see what people are doing before you can ask them about it. As with his earlier bird census at school, Harrisson mobilized a huge team of observers to gather information on the everyday lives of the people of Britain. He made their findings readily available to the press and the public, and for a while this social project was the talk of the nation. Nothing like it had been done before, and its archives are still being studied today.
Now, I'm looking for a box called Music, Dancing and Jazz. In this box, there are a lot of descriptions of people in the late 30s in dance halls. And this has got a diagram showing the positions of men's hands on women's bodies that this observer, A.H., recorded. Position 1 under her left shoulder blade, position 2 under her right shoulder blade, 3 centre of back, which is the correct hold. Left side of her waist is 4, 5 right, and then 6 is the centre. And then you go back up to 7, shoulder, 8 beneath her neck, and 9 below her waist.